If I had a nickel for every time a mysterious race in Stargate was connected to the Furlings through writing we don't see, I would have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened twice. Hello and welcome to another Stargate video. I want to examine an odd piece of lore regarding the Furlings. We only know a limited number of confirmed things about them. They were part of the Four Great Race Alliance, their writing system looks like this, their technology looks like this, and a group of them attempted to set up a colony in the Milky Way. But if you have been in the Stargate fandom for some time, you might have heard it said that the Touchstone was a piece of Furling technology. This piece of lore even made its way into fandom's video on the Furlings.
The weather-controlling touchstone on the planet Madrona, for example, a world terraformed by Furlings but now inhabited by primitive humans, was possibly of their origin.
But where does this come from, and does it hold the key to finding out about the Furlings? Well, let's really dive into this to find out. Starting off, what is the Touchstone? The Touchstone is a piece of alien technology introduced in the SG-1 episode, Touchstone. The plot of the episode is that SG-1 travels to the planet Madrona. They discovered the planet recently and want to do a more in-depth study of the planet's weather control device, the Touchstone. However, when they arrive, the natives, the Madronans, accuse them of stealing the device, saying that in the dead of night, people wearing outfits similar to the SGC's arrived through the gate and made off with it. With the device gone, the planet's weather starts to go wild, and it's up to SG-1 to find it, save the Madronans, and figure out who on Earth could have orchestrated its theft. It's a pretty good episode and gave us this classic SG-1 line.
In my culture, I would be well within my rights to dismember you.
Of course, where do the Furlings factor into this? Well, the episode never names the Furlings, but we do learn an interesting piece of lore about Madrona. It was theorized by Sam that the planet was terraformed about 900 years ago. Daniel adds that since the Madronans are a primitive people, it was most likely another alien race that terraformed the planet. That's kind of it for the backstory we get about these aliens, so how do the Furlings factor into this? That question is answered by our good old friend, the Expanded Media, specifically the Alderac Friends and Foes RPG. We actually learned some pretty cool things about the planet, the solar system, and the Madronans. For example, it appears there was an initial terraforming attempt that failed, causing a moon to break up, creating the rings we see around the sun. That sun is believed to be a gas giant that was ignited in a sustained fusion reaction. There is another star present, a blue star, but its distance to Madrona is greater than that of Pluto from our star, so it has no real impact on the planet. The Madronans are believed to be descendants of 2 different human groups, one group being of Caucasian descent and the other Polynesian. The major theory presented in the RPG is that these 2 human groups were settled by the Goa'uld on 2 different planets in the same solar system. But a neutron star passed through their system and fatally disrupted the orbits of the planets. Both groups were moved to a new solar system and world, Madrona in case you missed it, but by whom no one is sure. However, archaeological explorations have turned up artifacts on the planet which bear glyphs similar to the ones found in the Heliopolis. These writings suggest that the Cedars were the Furlings. So that means the Touchstone is Furling tech, right? Well, now it's time for me to be that nitpicky nerd who points out the problems. First is that point that always manages to show up in my videos, that many do not consider the extended media as canon. Another thing to consider is that I said these artifacts had Furling writing, but not the Touchstone itself. The RPG only connects these 2 by adding a third piece to the puzzle, Starseers, 6 satellites in orbit of Madrona. These satellites are said to be connected to those who seed the Madronians, and that these satellites are part of how the Touchstone works. I'll cover how the Starseers work in a second, but there's something odd about these artifacts I wanted to comment on. See, there's a reason I covered the lore about the solar system and the Madronans. These lore points are explaining things we saw on screen, the sun with the rings and why we have Caucasian people dressed like Polynesians. By the way, I'm aware this is not really how Polynesians dress, but you get my point. These exist to explain things visually on screen. Even when the RPGs do add things with no visuals, most of the times it's stuff that kind of makes sense. For example, the Starseers. Like I said earlier, these are 6 satellites in orbit of Madrona. They help with amplifying and targeting the Touchstone. The device can still work without the Starseers, but the range of the Touchstone is limited and the effects are random. This is a change from the episode where the effects of the Touchstone were random because the NID didn't know how to use it, but it's something that doesn't feel like it directly contradicts what the episode said and can actually work as a natural extension or even combination of what was said in the episode. But these supposed artifacts with Furling writing on them feel like a weird add-on because we never see them. And that's kind of an important detail to add with no real way to check. The whole thing feels like,
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the f*** up.
actually, you know what this really reminds me of? This reminds me of the City of the Gods situation. In case you don't know, City of the Gods was one of the Stargate novels made by Fandemonium. It's kind of infamous as it made the claim the giant aliens from the Crystal Skull episode were linked to the Furlings. This was because of Furling writing found in the pyramid hosting the Crystal Skull, despite the episode directly contradicting this.
I can't be sure there's no writings of any kind on the pedestal.
Now, I'll be fair to the book, these writings were in the basement of the pyramid, which the characters never went to in the episode. But you have to admit, that's kind of a weak argument. Again, going to that clip I animated, it feels like this was just made up. And yes, I know this is all made up. But if we are going to be critical of City of the Gods for doing this, then we kind of have to apply the same rules to the RPG. Though, oddly enough, I decided to check out the Wyvern Gaming RPG to see if it talked about the Touchstone, and I found something of note. Not much is said on the Touchstone itself, but the statue holding it reveals something rather curious. According to one of the characters in the RPG, she believes the statue is of the Mayan god Itzama. This leaves questions about the creators of the Touchstone, as the SGC has accounted for which aliens represent the various pantheons on Earth, such as the Asgard for the Norse and the Goa'uld for Roman, Greek, and Egyptian. However, a big exception is the Mayan gods, which they don't have a direct one-to-one for. I guess we'll just ignore we have at least two Goa'uld connected with the Mesoamerican gods, and the god I mentioned was a man and this statue is of a woman? You know, I tend to forgive Stargate when it makes goofs like this because the shows were running before the internet was the powerhouse it is today and you could look up information in like 5 seconds. But how does an RPG made within the last 5 years make this kind of goof? Especially since everything else said about this god in the RPG is accurate. Despite that goof, I do find that lore point interesting since the Wyvern RPG does make other connections to ideas made in City of the Gods. Those ideas being the Furlings were connected with Mesoamerican mythology. Moving away from the extended stuff, since one of the few things you know about the Furlings is their technology, can we compare the Touchstone to any other piece of confirmed Furling tech? It's a little hard to say. We have 2 examples of confirmed Furling tech to compare. First is the Furling circuitry, for lack of a better word, which doesn't really look like the Touchstone. And second, the portal dialing device. I'll be honest, I don't see much resemblance between the 2 devices. I know people have told me they see similarities between the 2, such as the Touchstone being purple and the portal dialing device making purple lights when the portal is on, but I just don't see it. I checked to see if the Touchstone has some Furling writing on it. It has markings, but they're only similar to the Furling writing in the sense that some markings have curves and some Furling writing has curves. One last point I thought I'd talk about is the planet builders. This was a mysterious race introduced in Stargate Universe who built an entire solar system. Many have suggested these could be the Furlings. If we go with the idea that the Furlings terraform Madrona, it would make sense they could be the planet builders. Unfortunately, there's 2 problems. First is that one of the writers, Joseph Malazzi, said the planet builders are not the Furlings. And second is terraforming and solar system building are 2 different technologies. I suppose you could argue the Furlings could have advanced far enough to that level of tech, but we know Madrona was only terraformed 900 years ago, which isn't all that long ago on a cosmic scale that a lot of the more advanced races seem to operate on in Stargate. To wrap this up, is the Touchstone Furling technology? If you're looking for a strict yes or no answer based on the rules of canon,
No. Nope.
that being said, there is an interesting angle to look at this through. See, I brought up this idea before in my Giant Aliens Are Not the Furlings video. The truth is, there was no plan for the Furlings. The name was just made up on a spot to fit an episode title, and the writers only did Paradise Lost because people kept bugging them about it. There's no real mystery or grand plan. The Furlings are a blank canvas that they could do anything with. With the news we are getting a new Stargate show, we might finally get an explanation. However, what that explanation is up to what the writers want to do. Joseph said the planet builders are not the Furlings, but maybe a new writer decides, you know what, I like the idea, let's go with that. And this applies to the Touchstone, the giant aliens, and what world's planned. Check out the video I mentioned if you want that story. But the writers could do something entirely different. I would like if they use previous information from the extended media, like the Wyvern RPG seems to have done, but that's only if someone in the writer's room really wants to do that. Again, if you're looking for a strict answer, that would be no, but it's a nice headcanon to have. And at the very least, some people who work in the extended media have paid attention to past ideas, and if we're lucky, maybe someone working on the new show is too. But what do you all think? Would you like to see the Touchstone as Furling technology, or would you prefer it to be a different race? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like and subscribe, follow me on my social medias, and remember,
If you're looking for specific answers, I'd ask that you be a little less cryptic with your questions.
Fine. Where's the touchstone?